Hey, what's up? So today we're going to import some data into Power BI using Microsoft SQL Server. It is a very simple process for the most part. And of course, I'm going to show you what to click and why you're clicking it. If you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you at the computer. Real quick, let's go ahead and do that. The first thing it's going to ask for is server. This is going to be your server name where your data is located. If you don't know where to get that from Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, I'll show you real quick. I'm going to pull over the window. So I've set up a super simple SQL Express instance. If we right-click the server and click Connect, we can see our server name, and that's exactly what you're going to put in Power BI. There we go. And really, that's it for the most part. Now, I don't recommend this, but I'll show you what we can do from here, right? So without selecting any more settings, if I click OK, it's gonna, the first time you connect to your data source, it is going to ask you for authentication. In this case, I'm just going to sign out as a Windows user. But if you have a DBA or IT team, ask them what you need to properly sign in. All right, encryption support, don't care. Then we can find our database and hide grocers, right? And it's there. We don't want to do it that way. When you're dealing with larger data sets, more columns, larger databases really, it's gonna fill up. It does have a search option, but it's just really not how you're gonna want to get your data. I'll show you why. So let's go back to SQL Server. Let's put our database back in here. And I'm going to continue explaining some more of these fields, right? So I want to skip the database for now. We'll come back to that. But I want to first explain the data connectivity mode. So we have import mode. All this is going to essentially download the information and attach it to the PBIX file. PBIX is the native file format for Power BI. So your data is going to be merged together, right? While direct query is going to leave the data in the database, and every time you alter your visual, your Power BI visual, is going to re-query the database and get the most recent data. So you might be wondering, hey, if I could always get the most recent data, why not just use that, right? Why not just always use direct query? Why is the default option import? Because it's not as fast as you might think. There's tons and tons of articles about one-off instances and edge cases, but typically you do want to stick with import. So let's go ahead and go to the advanced options. So our first advanced option is related to our SQL statement, right? So if we have a SQL statement that runs for greater than 10 minutes, because that's the default command timeout for Power BI, it's going to respect that time. So if I put in 20 minutes, it's going to let the query run for 20 minutes, then fail if it still hasn't returned any results. Now this is useful because especially as you further your SQL skills and you're just writing more and more complex queries, I've had to write queries that were optimized that still ran for 30 minutes because while the query was optimized, our database structure wasn't. I had to wait 30 minutes to get the data in, and that's just how long it took. So I need to change this to 30, right? The data we're working with isn't anywhere large enough to be worrying about that for now. Then we have our SQL statement. So why I like to use SQL statements is because, of course, any logic that you write and any transformations that you do with your data will just be represented in SQL. Now, working with a team environment, this is crucial because typically amongst your data team, everyone's going to know SQL, or at least everyone should know SQL. While everyone may not know, Power Query, or God forbid you try to do all your transformations in DAX, you're going to have people mad at you. I've had people mad at me. Just try to do everything in SQL. Make your life simple. And of course, if you're using source control, SQL does support source control. While right now there's no great source control options within the Power BI ecosystem. So let's go ahead and grab that query. So for instance, right? Let's say that we didn't want year, right? We either comment it out in the query, or we can just get rid of it, and we don't have to worry about it in Power Query. Any transformations you do in Power Query, especially as your data sets grow larger and larger and larger, it's just going to create essentially more technical debt that Power Query is going to have to process through, And finally, these last three options really could have a video in and of itself for each option to really go into all the nuances and edge cases when you would actually use these. But essentially, I've just copied and pasted and shoved some data into, shoved a CSV file into my SQL Server instance. So this include relationship columns won't do much. But if I have a nice relational database, I have my database diagram set up and all that. Power BI is smart enough to, hey, let's automatically get that table that's related to our data, and let's go ahead and create a model within Power Query, right? It's just smart enough to do that. So we don't need that. But if we did click this, it will essentially show all the schema in our database. This really isn't a SQL Server tutorial, but essentially if you want to see all your tables, like your MSDBs tables, your security tables, you want to use navigate using full hierarchy. But if you don't want to see all that stuff, then just leave it unchecked. Finally, this enable SQL Server failover support. If you're worried about this, you're probably not the audience for this video, honestly. But essentially, it allows support for failover clusters. So essentially, you can make SQL Server, more or less across different machines. For if you're updating, or a machine fails, it's gonna float over to another machine. But we're just gonna click OK. Oh, oops! And you see I almost put our database because it is required once we have a SQL query in here. So let's just use movies and click OK. So now we see our data and we're going to transform it. So Power BI is smart, but it's not that smart. It's going to use the data types that were set up in our SQL Server database. So in this case, since I literally slapped a CSV into our table, I didn't set any data types. So we're going to need to go in here and Power Query and change our data types. Super simple. Just find the data type you need and click it. So we have fixed decimal number here. We're going to have, what is this? Total dollar, yeah. So yeah, change that here. And you see that even though it had a dollar sign, Power BI is smart enough just to recognize and not cause recognize the correct data type and not cause a big fuss, which I like. Change this to whole number, right? So now we have the correct data types. We can close the load. Here's some data I did put in here earlier. We didn't change the name, but of our most recent import. But you can see just the difference, right? Now Power BI is recognizing that, hey, this is a number. This just isn't, a regular value, right? Because now Power BI knows the data type, it's just going to be a little bit smarter of how it works with the data. So let's create a simple visual real quick, just for demo purposes. Send that out, right? And watch what happens when we use our data set that doesn't have the correct data types. Look what happens. It doesn't recognize that our total in 2019 dollars are even numbers, right? And it just won't produce the right value. So hey, make sure you check your data types. Well, that's about it for today. If you like this video, we can do it right. If you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.